a perfect being sometime in the future?
No, unfortunately not. What's hard for people to kind of get sometimes is that we don't know where we're going. Anytime HIV evolves, it doesn't have any wants or needs or desires. It's just going where evolution takes it. We're going to be, okay, I've got a fun Lucy story. So I went to go see Astrolochus afarensis when she was in Houston. My brother was getting married. And she was in this glass box, and if you touch this box, alarms would start going off and lights and sirens. So all the kids that were there, their moms and dads were clutching onto them. They're like, my kid is not going to be the one to set off this alarm. And this little girl was looking at this mock-up of Lucy. And she was talking to her mom, and she knew she was about to say something kind of rude. And she was like, why is she so hairy? Because she was like this ape creature. And the mom laughed, and she was like, well, that's your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandma. And your great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter will think you kind of look funny, too. So, we have no direction. It's not going to be better. It might be worse than where we're at now, depending on what happens in our environment. But we definitely change, and we're changing in different ways due to our medical care. I say if the HIV epidemic had happened 5 million years ago, we wouldn't have had our modern technology to battle it. But now that we do, we have a moral obligation to figure out a vaccine, figure out new therapies. So instead of letting HIV just decimate our population until HIV is co-evolved nicely with us and we're nicely co-evolved with it, like what happened in other primates, we're actively fighting it. And that will have effects on how humans evolve in the future too.
Okay, thank you.
I was just listening when you made your analogy about the Legos, the little girl playing with the Legos, the dog chews up one, and she obviously wouldn't chew up a dozen of them to make them all the same. That'd be ridiculous. And I was just thinking, there's an awful lot of kids in America, and an awful lot of kids have Legos, and a lot of kids have dogs. Dogs are probably going to end up chewing on the Legos. And I was thinking he made a point about the two lemurs. And both of them contracted this same HIV virus, but they weren't linked together. They weren't in the same family. So I was just wondering if that's sort of like one of the dogs chewing on a Lego piece in this one little girl's bedroom, and then 50 miles away, another dog's chewing on the exact same Lego piece in another little boy's bedroom.
Yep.
So isn't that kind of like saying that when animals were evolving, one animal didn't necessarily have to get the HIV virus and pass it down the chain for everybody to have it. So it could have been that animals were all there together. God created them all, and one animal got the HIV virus, and then another one got the exact same virus. So it didn't necessarily have to be passed down the chain. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened in this particular case. But with the original paper, they didn't know whether they were the same or whether it was one event. But it was a PNAS paper. They wanted to get it out first. And so I believe this next one was a PLOS paper where they went back and were like, this was our original hypothesis, and this is what actually happened. So yeah, it's like two different kids had their dogs chew on their Legos, but you can tell the Legos apart. You don't think that it came from the same child getting it chewed up the same way. And it was related to HIV. It's in the same family, but the virus that infected these lemurs was very different from HIV.
All right. Yeah, I have a question for the doctor. When you were talking about the two dinosaurs, when you were talking about the dinosaur having like the blood vessels and all that, did they really come out like that, or was that after they were soaked? And things we read that through that little magazine that they were soaked for many hours to be able to show these blood cells.
Yes, you had to dissolve the calcium carbonate rocks that were around them, and then organic tissue fell out. It was a very mild acid bath, sort of like vinegar, to dissolve those things. And then there shouldn't, normally when you do that to a fossil, it completely dissolves because it's petrified, it's rock, it's lithified, it's permineralized. But when all the minerals were dissolved, there was flesh tissue left. And this was not the first time that had been discovered, that sort of thing. We found mummified skin, we found dinosaur beef jerky on the leg bone of the Santana raptor, which is supposed to be the evolutionary ancestor of T-Rex, so it's much older than that. And these things are biological artifacts. They shouldn't have been able to survive that long. It's just you can look at it in the Chemical Rubber Company's Handbook of Chemistry and Physics, what the rate laws, what the rate equations are, what the rate constants are for the decomposition reactions of proteins. And you can tell, even kept completely dry, because water will disassemble proteins, because the peptide bond is a dehydration synthesis bond. So if you hydrate it, it will unsynthesize and it'll decompose. But even dry, even squeezed dry, these things shouldn't be able to last. The amino acids should let go of each other, tops 100,000 years. Yet we have found biological pigment molecules in a 350 million year old crinoid stem that was discovered 2 years ago by a grad student and her professor at Ohio State. It was a crinoid stem with pigment molecules, complex biological molecules. So this is one of those things that because people just like to ask the question, you're a creationist, do you believe there are 6,000 years old? I said, I sure do. Got a problem with that? Well, what makes you think it's older than that? And then they'll always run to carbon-14 uranium dating and things like that, which are based on all 4 assumptions. But then we've actually got something like this that's not based on an assumption. We have hard data. We got something under the microscope, you can hold it in your hand, you can look at it, you can smell it. Dinosaur veins, what are you going to do with that? They can't last that long. So instead of saying, clearly they're not that old, this main establishment of the scientific community, not the creationist portion of the scientific community, the evolutionary portion has said, well, we just don't really understand decay like we thought, or we just don't really understand fossilization like we thought we did. But of course, the bone is still 68 million years old, 90 million years old, 350 million years old. That's going against data. That's the exact opposite of science. I have to make that indictment there.
But are you taking to the assumption that this is physically impossible to happen? I mean,
it's physically observed to happen, just like micro variation is physically observed to happen. There is no dispute that these cells exist. The photo I got came from the PBS Nova website. It was a television special hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson, a very well-known evolutionist, a very good host, as a matter of fact, and he was at the Beyond Belief Atheist Conference in Austin, Texas last year. He's an avowed atheist, but like I said, a very good show host. But here you go. This is where I got this. There's the citation. Look it up yourself. Everybody knows these tissues are real. It's data-driven thinking, not assumption-driven.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, if you take it into the assumption that assumption and
the assumption of what?
The assumption that it cannot survive, then why was it such a big deal when we found it? Because
the evolution model requires hundreds of millions, even billions of years for enough time for it to work. That's why it's significant. If these things really are only 4,000 years old, then it makes a big difference in whether evolution is even likely.
But then again, you're just going against the time scale. I mean, you're not disproving the methods, you're just proving the time.
That's because evolutionists are wedded to a 4.5 billion year time scale. We are wedded to a 6,000-year-old time scale, and this goes with us better.
But you're just nitpicking certain parts out. I mean,
whoa. This is not nitpicking, it's the data. I'll just put it up there and say, there it is.
Then show the rest of the dinosaurs that do not survive, the tissue that did not survive, and wet them and see what happens to them.
Well, there are buffalo that died on the Great Plains here in Oklahoma, and none of their tissues have survived, and we know they were here 200 years ago.
But that's still bone, and that can be fossilized. Fossils are different.
But this actually survived. How could it? It can't, according to known laws of science, it can't survive this long.
But to what you're saying, the laws you're putting out there, your laws cannot change, no matter what will happen ever.
I didn't make up that law. Like I said, you can look up the the rate equation for the decomposition of proteins in the CRC Handbook of Chemistry